to our next category, which is the Development Road Improvement Fund Report. For that, we have Rafu Aguile from Finance, Tom Munir from Department of Public Works, Jeff Brownell, who may be joining us in 7 minutes or so from DPZ, and Dan Lubley from Howard County Public School System Planning. Is that right, Theo? Yeah, okay. And same thing, I'm not sure, Director Munir, if one of you is able to give us a brief summary of the report and what's going on in this year and how perhaps that compares to prior years.
Sure. This is Rafu here. Good afternoon, Council Chair Walsh, Council members. But the Development Road Improvement Fund report is basically our excise tax that we collect from our citizens. And we do issue a debt based excise bonds on some of these, on the revenues we collect. The report is issued every quarterly. And I think the last report was October 21st that we sent to the county executive and the county council. Currently, we have outstanding debt of about $78.4 million. And the current balance we have in this account on the excise bonds is about $57.6 million. We have outstanding to pay the debt service. This year for FY21, we've only paid half of the debt service, and we hope to pay the balance February or March next year, because we do pay debt service twice a year. Currently, for the road excise tax bonds that we've issued, we've appropriated $203.8 million. Of that $203.8 million we spent $155.6 million. So we have an outstanding unspent balance of about $48.3 million, which is slightly different from the unappropriated, in addition to the $51.4 million appropriated bond funding that hasn't been spent yet. The reason between the variance between the two is because we have the bond anticipation notes that we issue to fund, which is our line of credit, to fund our projects. And then, of course, in February, March, or April, we issue the debt, which now goes into the debt service. That's kind of the breakdown. Also, we do have some paygo that we do add to the excise tax as appropriation from fund balance. You can see from the report on page 2, none has been appropriated for since 2018. So pretty much the balance we have in this account is, I would say, is all spent for the debt service, which is currently at $78.4 million.
Thank you, Mr. Aguile. Do we have any questions from the council? No? Anything to add by our esteemed other panelists?
Yes, good afternoon. It's Tom Munir, Director of Public Works. I would just add that we have about 20 or so projects currently in the CIP, all in the J section, which is road improvements. And based on what I could gather, it looks like most of those projects are for state highway type road contributions, similar to the Maryland 32 dualization project. There's a number of other ones in there, but that's kind of the gist of the program.
Are you seeing any effect in terms of contracting and construction progress due to COVID, or is everything just trucking along like normal?
Well, surprisingly, it's been chugging along like normal. Yeah, as you know, construction is one of the essential functions that the state government or governor has selected. So, yeah, it's been moving along quite well, actually. Getting ready for some winter weather, but that could kind of slow us down a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Young?
Mr. Mayor, how many projects did you say that you had in the CIP? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I said it's probably about 20 or so. I certainly can provide you a listing of that.
That would be great.
Sure.
You said most of the money, I guess, is in the state highway contributions. Is most of the money also, are most of the projects also projects that involve the state improvements? Or are there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, generally it is. I mean, there's the Route 1 work. See if I can get my list here. Yeah, Route 1, couple projects. There's one at Maryland 100 and 103. So, and generally, like I said, it's kind of like our contribution to those state type projects is how it's been worked out.
Do you anticipate that you'll be requesting approximately the same amount of money for these CIP projects in the budget for 22? And do you anticipate, it's a two-part question, that the state will be able to contribute I didn't like that grimace. What do you think the state will be doing?
Well, I think as you heard from the secretary and his briefing, that
Yes.
the majority of their projects are going to be, or the money that they have, are going to be towards systemic and preservation type work. So therefore, any new construction and widening improvements will unlikely get any funding from the state level. So as far as pushing those projects forward on our side, I mean, we kind of have to wait until the state comes up with their monies before we can go to construction or finalize designs.
Well, we're not going to stop work on 32, are we? I mean, that's such a big, how does that work?
No. All the work that's currently underway with construction is fully funded at this point, and it's moving along quite well. That'll take us all the way up to Route 70 or 144 at that point. And then that point north, I don't believe is gotten funded yet at this point.
So then there are other projects that are smaller that maybe haven't started yet, that we have put money, CIP money, in our budget already, and we were waiting for state money so that we could get started on it. Is that how it works?
That could be some of it. And then some of it could be also our own individual projects that we haven't fully funded as well. So I think once you get the list, you'll be able to probably answer some of those questions in more detail.
And of course, I know that you will enjoy the many hours you get to spend with us during the budget hearings. But we get to ask you all these questions again.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Meunier, do you mind, can you just remind us what properly we can spend this money on versus other, it's not sidewalks, it's not.
Right. Without the wording of the information or the law in front of me, I believe it's for providing capacity increase, whether that's in widening of a road to provide more capacity, possibly even doing some other types of improvements, like if a signal might increase the capacity of getting vehicles through an intersection, you might be able to use it there. There's also the possibility, but I don't think we've ever done it, is to use it for like bridge projects where you actually are increasing the load capacity on the bridge that, say, it was posted before, but at this point, no project has been funded using the excise tax in the bridge area. It's basically been for road improvements.
And roads for vehicular use versus bike or multimodal or?
That's kind of the way it's been interpreted now. I guess it could be open for other interpretations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I see Mr. Brownell was able to join us. I'm not sure if you or Mr. Lubley would like to add to our discussion about the Development Road Improvement Fund report.
Good afternoon. This is Dan Mobley, Director of Capital Planning and Construction with the school system. On this report, the school system doesn't deal really too often with the roads. So we're here for obviously supporting Director Munier and Mr. Brownell, but I have nothing further to add at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Lubley.
I would just, turn my video on here. Just add that we, as you know, we give our projection updates to the various agencies, including the Department of Finance each year. So based on those sort of projections, that's how these impact fees are calculated, or the road excise tax is calculated. I know this report is looking at, the past years, I believe. But I think one thing to keep in mind is, from what I understand, that all future projected development and then the road excise tax calculated from that really is to pay off debt service for existing bonds already issued. I don't think there's a lot of capacity, if any, left in the for future projects, from what I understand. The budget office would have a better assessment of that, but I recall that being said, and I think at the recent Spending Affordability Advisory Committee meeting, that sort of information was conveyed. I don't know the details of it, but my recollection is that it's a funding source that is mostly spoken for given the projections.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Brunner is absolutely correct. The money is spoken for, so it's always, most of the time, it's just to pay off the debt service. As I mentioned, we have about $78 million in debt service outstanding, and we have a balance of $51 million in cash. So the debt service far outweighs the cash we have on hand. So the collections in future years will be there to fully pay the debt service.
And then what pays the balance?
Oh, we're still collecting excise tax every year. So
Okay.
we're hoping that just that we can add new projects until we have enough balance that we know will be enough to pay off the debt service. Because the debt service is through 2039.
Okay. Mr. Glendenning, maybe you've been here the whole time, but it seems like you popped up on my screen. Do you have anything you can add to help council understand this issue better?
All right, so a couple of things. One, previously during budget time, we've asked whether or not we can anticipate receiving the state funding. The prior head of DPW, of course, Mr. Munier hasn't been through a budget yet, was happy to tell us that no, we can pretty much anticipate we're not going to get state funding in these projects. So I wanted to add that because Councilwoman Young brought that up. The other thing is we always get the cash flow on the excise road for the road revenues. And even though we have that large balance that the Director of Finance was just talking about, as of 2031, we go into a deficit. And by 2040, we're going to be in a deficit of 35.4 million. So, yeah, that's why you're not seeing these bonds looking like they're being in future appropriations, because we really can't afford to put any more in the budget. We'll get into a deficit sooner than 2031. And that's what we got as of April 15th of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Glendenning.
Sure.
Ms. Young?
Okay, so I just want to be really clear about what this means for the public. So this is also school construction funds, correct, Mr. Brownell? This is not just road, but it's also school construction funds.
Well, I think it's similar. So there's two types of fees that are collected in terms of excise tax. So one is the road excise tax, and then the other one is the school surcharge, which is also an excise tax. It's just known as the school surcharge. So those are collected based on the square footage of new construction for residential and non-residential development. Schools is only residential. The roads is non-residential and residential, I believe.
Okay, so, Mr. Glendenning, your comments just now about this fund being in deficit by 2031, and the comments by other members of this panel that all the money the bond money, it's been spoken for. We can't issue any more debt. Does that include school construction funds?
No.
It does not. Okay.
No, Mr. Brown now is correct. That's two different excise taxes.
So we're good with that. That money is not spoken for. I'm just trying to figure out if people keep adding more schools as in the Board of Education, to the list of schools that they want to see built, and that list always gets added to, do we or don't we have bond capacity to add more schools to our lists? I guess that's the question.
Okay, so we were looking at the roads here, so I have all the roads in front of me. I don't have the schools in front of me right now.
Okay.
But as of budget, because, we increased the school surcharge, I think we have additional bond funding, although we did appropriate some for, I guess, Hammond High School.
I got ahead of myself, or I got ahead of our meeting, because we are talking about the school surcharge, so I apologize.
Yeah, the chair's got to run this meeting better.
You need to shut me up.
What did she do? All right, yeah, but these are the same four panelists, at least according to my agenda, who will be joining us whenever we stop talking about the road development fee and move to the school fee. And it is the same issue. I think I see where you're going, but can you ask that question for the roads? That you're getting to on schools. Right. Is that the consequence of this? Is that we can't build any more new roads that we would customarily purchase with this bonding? Because people love roads in our county. So they love roads almost as much as they love schools. But yes, so what does that mean, Director Munier?
I think Craig was going to add something there.
Okay, Craig.
I'll let Craig go first.
Okay, we'll let Craig go first.
So, Mr. Clark was nice enough. He's listening in, and he just forwarded me the cash flow on the schools. And that's showing us going into a negative. But that was as of April 15th. So I don't have a more current one since then. So we would have to follow up with you on that.
Okay, that's on the schools, but then we just changed the question to the roads.
Oh,
no, that was on the roads.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's in our inbox.
Yes.
We just got, Craig sent it to all of the council members just now, and it shows.
Thank you.
It shows the ending balance, and I think that was my issue, is in 2031, when we have a shortfall of $2.6 million, which then increases over the next projected 9 years, is that deficit then funded by just general fund? Obviously, we still have to pay the debt service, so now that's coming out of a different pocket, right?
Right, it would have to be general funds at that time.
But in the meantime, we don't have the capacity to issue more bonds to build any more new projects? In the in our J list? How do we?
Not unless you want to go into the
J
negative
project?
sooner than 2031.
Well, I'm not the expert on this, but the road excise tax is only one funding source, right? So the question is, there's other funding sources for other capital projects that are, I guess, general obligation bonds, perhaps. I don't know if they do anyone.
I think there was.
There you go. Yes.
Craig, wouldn't you just put this in the, if you had to do it and the excise fund wasn't available and there weren't state grants, they would just become GO obligations, right?
Right.
Yes, they will.
Thanks, Ref. You.
Is this
Yeah,
fee
so
one of those?
then they're competing with everything else.
Right. I mean, is this fee reflective, we think, of the additional roadway costs imposed by new construction? Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, what, last year, this council reviewed and decided to increase the school's impact fee based on an analysis that it did not at the time. And this, what we have passed and will incrementally be implemented are we in the same situation where we're perhaps not assessing fees that are commensurate with the additional costs imposed by new construction, whether commercial or residential?
It could be.
What do you think, Director?
You mean
Lanier?
nobody wants to say, yes, we should increase taxes? I don't understand that. There's nobody on this meeting who wants to say, yes, absolutely.
I mean, there's several things. You can increase the fee, or you can decide not to do some of the projects that are already currently listed.
Okay.
But don't we run into the same problem there as we're starting to see when we look at these, like pre-submission meeting, Jeff, I'm looking for you. There you are. The more it's like it's cyclical, because this model is based on the current projections of development activity. And if you cut back the development activity, then you eliminate the need for maybe road projects, but you also eliminate some of the revenue that's coming onto that schedule, right? So it's like a chicken and egg thing.
Right. I mean, and I think it's probably important to keep in mind that, when there's a subdivision plan, that part of the regulations are that the developer does pay for the expansion of road capacity to serve their particular development. So the developer contributes. That's the whole Apfo road tests. The intent of the road excise tax, which was, I think, started in early 1990s, was to pay for these larger sort of countywide capital project needs. So, for example, some of the very few first projects that utilized this road excise tax, it was used to leverage state funding to do things like create the interchange at 216 and 29, or Johns Hopkins and 29, and Snowden River Parkway in 175. So it was really kind of used to leverage state funding, and it actually worked from what I understand. In other words, given we had this revenue source, and we went to the state back in the 90s and 2000s, look, we have this money, can you come in and match us to help us do these interchanges? So that was kind of the intent of the road excise tax at the time, and it's continuing to be used. But it's really for major road widening that really is not necessarily only due to county growth, because of the huge pass-through traffic, given where we are regionally, that kind of thing. I mean, it's really intended to accommodate growth, but so there's two types of things to look at in terms of, I think, the intent of the way this money is used. But
so do we run into the problem then of, even if we were to dial back, like if for whatever market forces, our development activity falls off and we have even less money coming into that fund, that doesn't mean our need to do some of these projects is going to go away, because they're more regional type commuter projects. The developers themselves are taking care of the local road.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, of course, development does contribute to the need for widening of major roads like Snowden River Parkway, things like that. But it's just more complicated than that. It is a regional kind of look, for sure.
Well, because out in D5, we've got Frederick and Carroll County commuters clogging our roads. So it'd be great to have this money to deal with those regional projects, irrespective of what's happening with our own development. Is this where we pulled money for 32?
Correct.
Is this the fund that we did 32 with?
Yes, it's part of that, yes.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Ms. Rigby?
I was simply I just want to put out there that when we think about roads and road constructions, that expanding our roads for other counties to pass through us to other places to spend money is not necessarily a benefit to Howard County taxpayers. And it's just something I want us to be cognizant of, because I think sometimes it'll speed up our traffic is alluring, but there are larger costs when it comes to induced demand and what we're really getting for our money by letting sort of one county pass through us on the way to another.
We should set up a toll for people to pass
President
through.
Millennial here.
Always looking for a funding source, yeah.
I mean, Christiana's right, but the reality is those are forces that aren't going to go away. We have no choice. If we don't widen Route 70 to accommodate traffic coming from other counties, then we will not get people off of Route 144 and Route 99, which are there for our own county residents to, do their local traveling. So that's sort of the domino effect of the problem.
I have one more question, and then maybe this panel will convert into the school fee panel. But that is, Mr. Glendenny, you keep saying that this chart that you emailed to us that shows the deficit coming in 2031 was based on April numbers. Is that because you're pulling like actual construction starts or fees paid through a date certain? Why?
So what you're looking at was actually prepared by the Office of Finance. And if you look at the top, it's based on projections of the Department of Planning and Zoning. So I think you have him online right now if you have any questions. But you've got both online, but this is a finance model, and it's based on what's appropriated, the bonds sold column, and then the bonds to be sold. And that's where you're seeing $61 million worth of bonds that are yet to be sold just on what's prior appropriations on roads. So that's what causes the deficit.
Oh, so it's already appropriated.
Yeah. And that's why it looks like we've got all that money, the $57 million in cash, but that's all spoken for.
Yeah, because the debt service outstanding is $78 million.
What's the interest rate assumption in there on the bonds?
There's no assumption here. These are real bonds that we've issued. So they're all different for different years, but it's around 3%.
Okay.
Mr. Aguilera, where's the $78 million in this report? I must be missing it. Is that figure stated here somewhere?
Yes, it's on the first page of the report that you received on October 21st. It shows all the date of issue, the amount that is outstanding, and the final maturity. And then the total is right below on page 1. Starts with November 11, 2011. Yeah.
I got it. Sorry. Yeah, I got it. Okay. Anything else from the council on
Can I ask one
development
more
road improvement
question?
funds?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Young.
What is finances? And I see if you look at the bottom, the 142 and 61 get you that at 203 of what we've already appropriated. Is some of this like debt appropriation that's sitting on the books that we're never going to do anything with? Or is the expectation that we're really going to spend another $61 million on those projects?
Yeah, that's the expectation. You're right, because we've already capital projects. We've allocated some of these bonds to these capital projects, as Mr. Munier said earlier. And now, once those projects are completed, on an annual basis, we do issue debt, and that's why I was saying in the report that we issued on October 21st. There's a variance between the unspent amount and what we actually have unspent in the report that you had earlier, because of the the bond anticipation notes that we're issuing for some of these projects, which is slightly over $3 million so far as of October.
To answer that also, Mr. Youngman, is if you look under the bonds approved, you'll see some negative amounts. Those negative amounts are based on where they understand some of their prior appropriations aren't needed, aren't going to happen.
Okay, so we've already got the benefit of pulling out the stuff that's not going to happen.
Right.
Yes.
Built in. You know, and it doesn't look like the excise tax collected, you know, comes to, you know, really, I mean, it starts to slow down, honestly, now. If you look at the last, you know, you just kind of take the average of each 5-year little tranche there. But then it stays pretty steady. Is it just because we're not collecting, you know, the square footages aren't enough to generate those bonds?
That's definitely a Mr. Brunow question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the long-term projections are based on the current general plan. And the rate of development in the county is slowing down now, and it will continue to slow down. So yes, that's the reason that the amount of revenue is expected to come in is because the amount of square footage built in both terms of residential and non-residential is increasingly smaller.
Because it looks like for the last 10 years, we've been averaging about $6 million a year. And starting this year, it never gets back to that as an average.
Well, I think this model is also the post-COVID model, correct, Jeff?
Well, that I'm not 100% sure on that. It is, so it probably is related to the projections that we did in conjunction with the fiscal study relating to the impact of APFO.
All right.
Yeah. So it involves really, it's really not the COVID thing. It's more the impact of the recent changes to the APFO, which is anticipated to have an impact on future growth. In part. The other part is just the general trend of the land in Howard County is becoming scarce. So the amount of opportunity for new development is less. We're approaching build out.
So, I mean, is anyone suggesting a solution to this?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
I mean, what's the solution that I guess from finances standpoint, is this something the administration's already looking at, or are we hoping that the world changes by 2031?
Yes, we are looking at it, but that's one of the main reason why we said there's no more capacity to issue any more new bonds.
Okay, well, I hope when we get the capital budget in a few months, everybody remembers this conversation. So,
Do redevelopment projects pay this fee?
I think, yes, I think if it's adding net new square footage.
Okay.
Yeah, like, so if you add new square footage, you have to pay for it. You probably want to check with DILP on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it works.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Bruno. That makes sense.